femininity has just been so negatively stigmatized, not by men, but by women over the years. The way to get the best out of male co-workers is, if you're a woman, is not to try to behave like a man. They have enough men in their lives. They've got enough men around them. Well, I would recommend reading Fascinating Womanhood. But I mean that like quite sincerely.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel. I'm Cherry Lynn. Usually on our channel, we talk about everything that has to do with developing femininity and building strong, long-lasting relationships. I'm usually here with my mother, Dixie Andelin Forsyth, but today we have a special surprise, something a little different for all of you. We are so excited to be able to introduce to you the very lovely and very brilliant and talented and very charming Daisy Cousens. Daisy is a friend of Fascinating Womanhood. Dixie and I have been following her for quite some time. We just love all of her content. She's an ADH TV host as well as a YouTuber. Daisy is a lovely and charming, prominent Australian commentator, writer, and media personality. We just love Daisy and we're so excited to have her on our channel. Dixie and Daisy are talking about femininity in the workplace. Who better to ask than Daisy? She has a lot of experience in a lot of different types of work settings and places, and we're so excited to hear what she has to say. She has such a unique perspective on how women fit into the workplace, and we just love her. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dixie and Daisy.
Thank you so much for joining me, Daisy. She's in Australia. I'm in Missouri. What time of day is it there?
It is just gone 10:36 a.m. actually. It's a very nice time of the morning. It's not too hot yet, but it's going to get a lot hotter, that's for sure.
Yeah, we talked to our daughter Lisa, who is in Brisbane there, and yesterday, and she said it was getting very hot. So
yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, asking you because you have quite a vibrant career and you're a feminine woman, which is you don't always see. So about women in the workplace. So okay if we just jump in?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, the first question. What is the most challenging thing that you have found in working with men versus women?
Oh, well, that's an interesting one, because I historically have had more trouble working with women than I've had working with men. I've always since I was a little girl got on with boys, and then when I grew up with men very well. Whereas women, yeah, if anyone was going to have a problem with me in the workplace, it's women, which is interesting, because the way that sort of culture depicts it and feminism depicts it, it's always, oh well, men are going to bully you in the workplace. It's like, well, that's not really the case. I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that women are very, I think, evolutionarily programmed to compete with each other. I mean, for millennia, we had to compete with each other for resources. As you had to find the man with the biggest club to defend the door of the cave from animals, so you could then raise the children inside, like in rudimentary terms. But that has totally has continued into nowadays, even though women can be totally self-sustaining if they want to be, at least in the West. So I think the biggest challenge with men and women in the workplace is learning and really checking myself, because we've all got it in me. All women have it in us to do that with other women. It's just really ensuring that I don't compete. And if I've got a woman who is trying to sort of undermine me or doesn't like my, femininity thing, a lot of women in workplaces are very threatened by femininity because they've been programmed to think it's a weakness or it's just attention seeking or whatever, rather than just simply a way of interacting with people. Just, taking a step back and not engaging. And I find that when I do that, women tend to realize that you're not a threat. Like, you're not there to steal their job. You're not there to steal their husband. They're not, you're not there for any of that. So it's really just making sure I don't fall into that woman-on-woman trap of competing in ways that we don't need to.
Do you think they would treat you the same if you weren't feminine? If you were more kind of masculine approach, dress?
Definitely. Oh, definitely. I think they would. They'd probably be a lot less suspicious of me. It's so funny, Dixie, that nowadays, being a feminine woman in the workplace and just socially, it's sort of unusual. Like if you look at it sort of in a corporate way, like in a workplace way, women are very much sort of told that they need to be, quote unquote, masculine in order to succeed in the workplace. And if you look socially, just look at like fashion trends nowadays, like the younger women, for instance, they all just look sort of like feminine boys a lot of the time. It's very fashionable. Androgyny is really, really fashionable nowadays. You don't see, I mean, I'm 35, but I look at women in their 20s. You don't see them wearing pretty dresses or with, just sort of shoulder length brown hair or anything like that. Androgyny and being a bit masculine is sort of the norm now in a funny sort of way. And I think there is an assumption that if you're a woman and you're presenting in a typically feminine way, then you're either seeking attention or you're seeking to undermine other women, or there's something a little bit wrong with you. So no, I think they would definitely treat me differently if I presented in a more kind of corporate, masculine-ish way.
Okay, so those same women, to put it just sort of broadly, how do they treat men as compared to you? Are they more flirtatious? I don't know. What do they do? Are they different?
Um, yeah, they're a little bit different. I think women always some women have trouble dealing with men in the workplace because they think that they have to also be men. And I've seen like women actually be really mean to men in the workplace, like, really try to be sort of aggressive or undermine them, etc., which isn't really conducive to a healthy work environment by any stretch of the imagination. But I think they sort of feel like they have to. And that's just not the case. I've never found interacting with men on that level in any way productive. I mean, I've been in situations where I've had to, manage men or be on a team with men. And I went through my sort of misguided feminist phase for a few months back in 2015, 2016. We're all allowed to be wrong once.
Or twice.
Or twice. Yeah, we're allowed to be wrong for a little while. But yeah, I found that there was a period of time where I was trying to be sort of very kind of assertive with the men I was working with. But I realized that I wasn't getting the best out of them. And it was a conversation I had with someone who suggested, look, Daisy, there's no, like, it makes no sense for women to try to play father when they're interacting with men, particularly men they're working with. Like this person said, why don't you try to play mother? Don't try to be the patriarch, try to be the matriarch, emulate that. And so I changed my modus operandi around them. And became more feminine. I stopped trying to be aggressive. I stopped trying to be sort of overtly assertive or anything like that. I was very maternal, I guess, in how I dealt with them. And I noticed the change pretty quickly, actually. Like, they were much more willing to, to do things for me and to get things done. And it was just simply changing the way I interacted with them has really change just the way that I interact with men generally. There's a way to get the best out of them if you're a woman, and trying to be a man is not going to get the best out of men.
Yeah, you become kind of a weird man.
Yeah.
You're not playing to your strengths. Okay, so here's another one. Have you ever had a man be disrespectful to you? And if so, how have you responded or reacted?
Oh, that's an interesting one, because there's lots of ways people can be disrespectful. I mean, they can be like, they can undermine you overtly, like, they can sort of unnecessarily criticize your ideas, and, they're trying to do it to sort of, tap at your confidence. Or some people might consider, say, flirting in the workplace disrespectful. And again, that's a whole nother matter altogether. I mean, that's a matter of context as well. But if we're thinking of sort of overt disrespect, there was, I can think of an instance that happened a little while ago, where I had a male coworker sort of try to kind of undermine the work. I'd pulled him up on something very nicely, but I pulled him up on something, and he tried to kind of push back. And it was sort of amusing. I giggled internally, but I didn't blow up. I didn't try to intimidate him. I just very kind of quietly talked through the situation and made him sort of repeat his own assertions back to him, which sort of made them sound kind of silly, when it comes to that. I said, oh, look, if you think of anything else, well, you just let me know. And I'd left there. And so I've stayed very, very calm and quiet. Again, maternal is the word I would use. You sort of explain why what they did was wrong, and make them say it out loud, and then they realize, and they go, oh, okay. And everything was completely fine after that. But I reckon if I tried to react like a man and try to sort of puff out my chest or yell, that wouldn't have got the best out of him. It certainly wouldn't have got the best outcome for the situation, and probably there'd still be tension between us.
Right. Okay. Okay. So do you think that women who are feminine have a hard time progressing in their careers because of their feminine? Do you think it's harder for them to progress, or does it make any difference?
Oh no, I think it can. I think it can make. Well, look, it really depends on the workplace, doesn't it? But I think in the corporate world, it can make it a lot harder.
Really? When you are feminine? When you are feminine?
When you are feminine, yeah, it can be, and
Ah.
I've experienced that directly. Without going into too much detail, but yeah, I've been at the brunt end of that, and it's quite a realization. And it's not a matter of an organization not wanting women to progress. I mean, like, there are organizations nowadays are falling over backwards to promote women and to employ women, and they've got got to hit their ESG targets. But there's a particular type of corporate woman that they like to employ, and it's the type that wears the suit jackets and
I was going to say the suits.
yeah, the suit jackets, and there's, look, if you're a woman and you want to wear suit jackets and shoulder pads to work, God bless you. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's a particular type of woman, and in a corporate environment, those are the women who, at least just from my observation, have an easier time progressing. And that is a strange sort of misogyny, because it's not that they're not promoting women or employing women, it's that they're employing women who are typically masculine, which is a sort of roundabout kind of misogyny or sexism. It's very, very weird. But yeah, I experienced it recently in a different workplace, and I was quite galled by it, but it was very, very revealing. There is a stigma about being a feminine woman in the workplace, which I think is really unfortunate.
What is the stigma?
That I think somehow femininity is lesser than masculinity, that you can't be feminine and also smart, or feminine and also assertive, or feminine and also analytical. I think femininity gets, and this is thanks to our second wave feminist sisters, the second wave feminism was great, a lot of good things happened, but they really did do femininity a disservice. Like, femininity gets conflated with being girly or childish or
babyish, really immature.
Or immature, and which is and really, like, nothing could be further from the truth.
Oh, absolutely. What about sexual harassment? Now, that wasn't even on my list, but I have thought about that, because some women have said they're afraid to be too feminine because of men coming after them more quickly, perhaps.
Oh no, I don't think being more or less feminine in the workplace actually contributes to whether or not you're going to get sexually harassed at all. I mean, you have girls who work as checkout chicks wearing, Woolworths uniforms, who presumably get sexually harassed by bosses who they're wearing a uniform. Like, it's got nothing to do with being feminine or not. I always think of sexual harassment is just it's bullying. It's another way of workplace bullying. It's making often a lower tiered employee feel uncomfortable by behavior, by a certain type of behavior. It all falls into that bullying thing. But no, I don't think dressing in a more feminine way at all will make you get sexually harassed more, because that's sexual harassment is about power, really. It's just not about attraction. So no, women, I wouldn't worry about that, not at all.
Do you think that some women misunderstand being feminine versus being seductive, like dressing with a lot of cleavage, tight short skirts, stiletto heels? Do you think women sometimes conflate femininity with that? Versus...
Yeah, I think so. I think so, totally. I mean, what I'm wearing now is that's typically what I'm wearing. This is a very feminine top, like, it's
very,
pink.
very pretty. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pink.
I love it. Yeah.
Lace. Oh, it's one of my favorites. I've had it for such a long time. But this isn't what you'd describe as promiscuous or anything like that. I'm not showing any, I'm not showing any cleavage. I'm not. There's no boob. There's nothing like that. But it's still a very feminine top, and I would call a lot of, particularly nowadays, when being sexy is just like, you look at like Cardi B video clips, and it's just like, that's not even titillating. That's just like body parts. And you go, what is this? I wouldn't call that feminine at all. That's almost like a weird sort of performance art. I would call that kind of garish sexuality. There's nothing. It's almost like a drag queen. Like, there's no
costume. Yeah,
it's a costume. So again, like, femininity has just been so negatively stigmatized, not by men but by women over the years, who I think as ideologues didn't fall into a kind of typically feminine category and felt sort of insecure about that and kind of tried to push back. But no, being like overtly sexual and being feminine are two different things.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, so next question. Do you have any female figures that you look up to that inspire you?
Oh yeah, I do. There's a wonderful Australian woman. She was a former chief of staff for a prime minister called Tony Abbott. Her name is Peter Credlin. And she, she's always been very feminine. She now has a terrific show on Sky News Australia. And she's sort of, I don't know, like, about 50, and she always wears the red and the beautiful long hair, and she just
Oh, I'll have to look her up.
Oh yeah, you'd love her, and like, of course, like, she's the most wonderful conservative commentator as well. She's so right on the issues, and she's been such a wonderful source of support to me when I've needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's quite extraordinary, because if you ever want an example of a woman who's been bullied horribly by other women, it's Peter Credlin. Like, you could look back at a time in Australian Parliament and the way she was treated by women on the other side of politics. It's just disgusting. But she's a woman who I think she's not feminine like I'm feminine. She's much, it's a different type of power femininity. But she's an example of a feminine woman who has managed to rise above just the noise of people trying to tear her down for her wonderful accomplishments and her wonderful intellect and her wonderful way of presenting. And she's just lovely. So yeah, anyone, if you want a feminine role model who really just rises above the noise, Peter Credlin. She's an absolutely wonderful person. So definitely she's a woman I look up to.
Wow, thank you. I'll have to look her up.
Yeah, you like her.
Okay. Okay. What do you think is the most common mistake women make in regards to femininity in the workplace? So maybe that's hard to say. What's a mistake?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Probably just not being feminine, if that makes any kind of sense. But yeah, the most common mistake is just conflating femininity with something that it's not, or thinking that people are going to think they're being promiscuous or attention seeking or anything like that. Because being feminine is really, like, it's a tool that men don't have. And if I've found that, as I said before, that the way to get the best out of male co-workers is, if you're a woman, is not to try to behave like a man. They have enough men in their lives. They've got enough men around them. It is so refreshing, I think, from a male perspective, to be addressed by a woman who is behaving like a woman. Because believe it or not, most men actually really like women, contrary to what feminists are. They really like women. They like the company of women because we give them something different from all of the men that they're around all the time. And it's not just a way of dressing either. It's a way of talking. It's a way of presenting. It's a temperament. And that doesn't mean you have to be demure or anything like that. You can still be very assertive, but it's not screaming at people, for instance, which is typically sort of masculine and aggressive. It's relating in a different way, and it's much more efficient if you're a woman to do that than to try to be a man, which is something you're not good at, because guess what? You're not a man.
Not one. Yeah, you're not one. Okay, so do you have any advice for women who want to develop their femininity but are afraid to do it in the workplace, probably because they don't know how?
Well, yeah, I would recommend reading Fascinating Womanhood. For start, and I mean that, like, quite sincerely. That is a wonderful book, Dixie. The whole thing is such a wonderful enterprise. So I would say, step one, read Fascinating Womanhood. And step two, like, wear clothes. Don't be afraid to wear clothes that you're comfortable in. Like, I can't think how anyone. Well, I mean, some women, again, with the suit jackets and stuff, some women feel really good wearing them. I just think it's much nicer to wear a dress, and you can wear a sensible dress to work. Like, it doesn't have to be all ruffles and frills, but it's about, say, having a waistline or a flared skirt, for instance, which would just make you feel, maybe wearing a petticoat underneath. I have a whole stash of petticoats. They're great. They're really comfortable, and they make everything sit so nicely. And if you start to sort of just emulate that different style of dressing, it'll probably affect your behavior as well. And what I'd say is, if you want to develop your femininity in terms of temperament or whatever in the workplace, I think the first piece of advice would be, don't feel like you have to flare up if there's a sign of stress or conflict. Like, there are ways of managing conflict in the workplace that don't involve losing your temper or being passive aggressive. Avoid being passive aggressive, please, ladies, at all costs. It is so unattractive. It's actually worse than screaming at someone, because then it's very hard for people to know where they stand with you. Be my goal when I'm in the workplace with everyone that I'm there with, whether it's men or women, is to get the best out of them. How can I get the very best out of these people that I'm working with? And I find that if I am charming and I am happy, and I also let them know when I think they're doing a good job, there's really something to be said for, I guess, like maternal encouragement. You know, if someone with you, you go, you know what? I really loved that, those questions you wrote for me for that interview. They were really fantastic. Oh, thank you so much for coming in late to help do the tech side for that interview. I really, really appreciate it. I know it was out of your time frame, but they were a great guest and it was really nice of you. Really let people know when they're doing a good job rather than just criticizing them when they're doing a bad job. So those are the ways of doing it I would recommend.
Yeah, well, you're talking about what sounds like in my book about charm, and charm. Everybody loves being around a charming person, and I think it's appropriate everywhere, anywhere, and everywhere. And so, but now I want your answers instead of me giving my thing. So, okay, so here's one that I really am interested in your feedback on. We often hear women say that when they come home from work, they have a hard time, quote, turning on their feminine energy because they've been at work all day and have to turn it off for some reason. Why do you think this is? It's like they have to be, yeah, and it's happened a lot. We've had a lot of questions like that.
That's an interesting question because I think if you're being naturally feminine, it's not something you'll just sort of pull out at work. You know, it becomes the more you do it, the more of a habit it becomes. And the thing is, like, you can come home from a stressful day at work. And yeah, like you might want to pull on your tracksuit pants and your jumper and all of that. And that's fine. That's, what I do, but you can still be charming. Like, you can still ask people how their days were. You can still, tell jokes. You can still make positive suggestions. Hey, how about we all watch this nice TV show tonight, etc. Yeah.
Do you suppose perhaps their femininity, they haven't really gotten in touch with it and they're kind of putting it on rather than it's part of them? Could that
I think so. I think they're probably also putting a tremendous amount of pressure on themselves as well. Like femininity comes naturally to women because that's what we are. We're women. And I think maybe they've got the wrong mindset about it. Maybe they think it is like a switch you can turn on and off and it's simply not part of you. Like I think maybe they're thinking of it as, oh, this is just a professional tool that I use rather than literally a way of being. And they're just, I think, probably putting too much pressure on themselves. Nobody is the same person at home as they are at work. So if they're feeling like they have to be, super polished in the workplace, which we all want to be, we want to be sharp, we want to be on top of things, we want to be looking nice and all of that. You don't have to bring that exact feminine energy back with you at home because tell you what, everyone else in the household is also probably tired and stressed after a day of work and a day of school. So you don't have to feel like you have to be that same polished feminine version of yourself than you do at work. Yeah, go home, take off your makeup, put on your comfy clothes, that's fine. But you can still have that feminine charm and that feminine consideration that should just be, it is just a natural part of women's manner if they don't put pressure on themselves, I think.
What we're trying to do is help women to learn and to be in touch with their femininity as being them. It isn't something they like, it's not appropriate for me to be feminine in this situation, I think, but it's who you are. So we're trying to get them to incorporate it so much into their lives that it is them and they don't think about turning it on and turning it off, because it's a shame that I don't think men so much do that. Do you? Like, they don't say, I'm going to be masculine here and not masculine here. They're just them. And
yeah.
And I kind of think feminism has played a part in that.
It really has. And I think it's a shame. Yeah. I think men, no, they don't like consciously say to themselves, oh, it's not appropriate for me to be masculine here. Or, oh, I have to be masculine in this situation. They just sort of.
They just are. Is feminism very big in Australia?
Yeah.
Okay. It is here too. So I guess one could say, where is it not? Maybe some places in Asia. I don't know. South America, not as much. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends where you go, and it depends on like what we mean by feminism. Because we both agree a lot of feminism is really good. I mean, equality of opportunity. Yeah. I mean, when you and I were chatting on my show on ADH, you pointed out that say domestic violence, for instance, used to be just a matter of, well, that's just between a husband and his wife. But the feminist movement was like, well, no, that's actually a crime. Like you can't do that. So there've been lots of terrific developments with feminism. And I think there's a difference between equality feminism and what I call pop culture feminism. Pop culture feminism isn't about ensuring equality for women. It's about policing their behavior. And
well said. Well said.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's about policing women's behavior, and also about policing men's behavior, making men kind of wary around women. And it's about I've written so much about this, and the women who are very extreme about it, they see it as sort of a form of retribution for a patriarchal
Oh.
like they want a kind of like, and I mean this quite seriously, they would like a sort of like female matriarchy for the to sort of balance out the patriarchy. They don't want equality, they want female supremacy, and they want revenge, which is incredibly toxic. And you see that in culture rather than in the legal system, thankfully, although there's a bit of a push in Australia in terms of custody laws to kind of upend that bit, which is really not good. So I think in Western culture, and it's been pushed through universities, it's been pushed through the entertainment industry, we see it very much in culture, less so again in places like Asia, but then they have the flip side where women aren't equal. It's very, very different there. So I'd much, we both, I'm sure, rather live in America and Australia than somewhere like that. But there has to be a balance struck somewhere. I don't think you can call yourself a feminist and yet you dedicate your life to policing other women's behavior and, effectively abusing women who don't agree with you. That's not a feminist, I don't think.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, don't we all want terrific relationships? Mm-hmm. I mean, that Harvard study, I can't remember whether I talked to you about it or not, about what makes people happy. And it isn't getting your way, whether you're male or female. It's about the quality of your relationships. And when women or men, usually more women, probably because we are women, we hear it more, they complain about the way things are. It doesn't say, like, they'll complain about their husband or they'll complain about this or that. And you think, well, don't you, what we're going for here is a terrific relationship where you keep your romantic feelings for each other throughout your life and it doesn't end. That's the whole point of what makes us happy, I think. So I don't know, that's maybe a bit of a side note, but I do have another question for you. Okay. And this is I'm interested in this answer too. Is it difficult for you to fulfill domestic tasks at home along with a career? And if so, what tips might you have? Because I don't know what your hours are. It's probably different every day.
I'm not terribly domestic. That's where I fail on the feminine front. It is hard. I mean, I work from home most of the time. And it's hard even for me as someone who works from home to organize myself to do domestic duties. So I don't know how women who have to work out of home manage to do it. My husband is much more domestic than me. Actually, he's a much better housekeeper. He loves to cook. Which is great. Yeah, he loves to cook. I offer to cook. He goes, no, I'm happy to cook. And I go, all right, my love. If he loves to cook, he finds it very relaxing. And he's very good. He with mowing the lawn, and I guess sort of the typically kind of masculine domestic tasks. But I should take my own advice, I think, when it comes to domestic duties, which I guess is to just acknowledge that, one, it will actually take less time than you think to do, and two, the sooner you do it, the sooner it's done. So I think as with anything, whether it's even like things like going to the gym, but certainly with chores, I think they can turn into like a massive thing in your head. And then when you end up doing them certainly with me, after I've put them off for such a long time, you go, oh, that took what, like 10 minutes of my day? That actually didn't take very long. So it's like with any kind of procrastination thing. And I think maybe, and again, I will take my own advice on this. Focus on how you'll feel after the job is done.
Right.
When I get around to, when I end up cleaning, I feel so good afterwards. You go, oh, that was so productive, and now the house is nice, from my husband, and we got rid of all the cat hair and stuff. But yes, my husband is a much better housekeeper than me, so that's where I
that's fine. That's absolutely fine, because we don't say that everyone is exactly the same. They're not. And I also say, because some women think, well, is it bad for me to hire people to help with the cleaning, laundry, cooking, whatever? And I said, if you can afford that, but most people cannot afford that. Theoretically, if you could afford to hire help for all those domestic tasks, it doesn't make you unfeminine. It's if you can find someone that you can actually trust, that doesn't steal from you or that does a good job and actually takes a load off of you, there's nothing wrong with that, because the most important thing that I think a woman does in the home is create atmosphere, and you don't need to do. And just out of interest sake, one time Bob and I, we timed how long it took to make the bed. it was less than 30 seconds. So I thought,
Yeah.
why do people not make their bed? It doesn't, even if you do it alone, it doesn't take anything to do it. It's a habit more than anything. And then you don't come home to a jumbled bed and that down feeling when you see it.
It's good for your psyche as well to make your bed. Like they say psychologically, if the first thing you've done in the morning is something that's productive, even if it's something as simply small as making your bed, then that'll put you in a better state of mind for the rest of the day because you've achieved something already. Yeah.
Okay, so we often have women ask us how to approach female coworkers in addition to males. Who is more difficult for you to collaborate with and why? You may have kind of answered this before with you find women.
Yeah. And like, it depends on the women. I mean, I've had women in workplaces who I have terrific relationships with. It just depends on the workplace and what you're doing. Like my producer now at ADH TV is a woman, and she's fat. Like we have such a good relationship, like because we're very similar. Like, you know, we've got similar values, we've got similar views on feminism, and we don't compete with each other. We just inherently
that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. She's amazing. She's gorgeous. I adore her. She's fantastic. So you can have these fabulous relationships with women in the workplace. But I think ultimately over the course of my career, not so much when I was, you know, doing customer service when I was at university. That's a whole other thing because you're there kind of doing like you're ushering at a theater or you're selling tickets for things. That's a different type of work. But in like the media landscape, the people, and I hate to say it, the people who I've had the most trouble with collaborating with have always been the women. And again, it's that female drive. We are programmed with evolutionarily to compete with each other. And I'll reiterate it again, like girls, ladies, we have to stop doing that. You have to stop doing that with the women in your workplace. You have to really take responsibility for yourself and catch yourself when you find yourself falling into that trap, because we all fall into it. It's how we are. And it is, if you want to talk about toxic femininity, because that is a thing, I would say that is a major characteristic of toxically feminine behavior. You know, if you want to talk about toxic masculinity, I say you have to talk about toxic femininity. That's a big part of it. Watch yourself, because if you can catch yourself, you'll have a much better time in the workplace with all of your colleagues, both women, obviously, and also the men, because the men notice that. They notice that female co-worker behavior, and it makes them uncomfortable as well.
So obviously there's a level of maturity that's required to do that. But other than maturity, would you say to these women, maybe take into account your relationship with all of these people, these women, and not watch yourself about competitiveness, and instead of focusing on that person, and they have to go home and have problems. And
oh yeah, that's true. I mean, there's always there's a saying that everybody around you is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. You know?
I think that's true.
Yeah, it's a lovely saying, and it's a good thing to remind yourself if someone is being like, you know, grouchy at work, or maybe they're trying to press your buttons, like just think, okay, well, maybe they had a terrible argument with their husband this morning, you know, or maybe one of their kids is sick, or maybe there's a parent that's sick, or maybe someone's been mean to them, and like, you know, how you end up the cat that's got kicked, you know, you end up in someone's way who's just been kicked by someone else. And again, I think it's about outcomes. Like, you know, what do you want the outcome of this situation to be? Do you want a peaceful workplace and a good relationship with this coworker? Well, yes, that should always be the outcome. So what would be the best way to achieve that? Is the best way to achieve that to retaliate? Or is it the best way to go to sit them down, talk to them and say, hey, I've noticed you're behaving like this. Is everything okay? And I guarantee you that in the vast majority of cases, the second way of managing that situation is the right one. And it's the most feminine one.
And sometimes perhaps just ignoring some bad.
Sometimes just ignore it. Sometimes it's just a blip and it's not even worth engaging with.
Well, do you have any other tips for us? I don't have your experience in the workplace. I'm in the workplace now, but it's different. And I didn't have to do it when my kids were growing up. And so your advice is really valuable. My workplace is mostly, I work from home mostly. And so it's different. I do these things like this and film things and stuff like that and write. But I don't have to deal with coworkers. I haven't had to. So, and this is a new era when things are different. There's like feminism, like you said, has brought some things that we desperately needed. For one thing, equal pay. I mean, you know, I was reading that Walt Disney, even though I think he was a really amazing man, he underpaid his female employees because he thought they were just working on the side. And I don't think he realized that some of them had to work to survive. They weren't just making extra spending money. They threatened to quit at one point because, and he was surprised. He didn't understand why they were doing it. So he just underpaid them.
Yeah, exactly. Like there have been like great things like equal pay. I mean, that's the big one that springs to mind that feminism has done. I mean, like in terms of workplaces, I mean, I've been in lots of different types of workplaces during my the course of my life. At the moment, like the last few years, I've been able to work mostly from home. Nowadays, I do a bit of office work. I fly down to Sydney once a week to film for ADHTV. So I spend quite a bit of time with co-workers down there, both men and women. In the past, I used to work at a women's magazine where I was going in 5 days a week and working exclusively with women. So that was a whole nother ball game again. Yeah, that was interesting. And then prior to that, like when I worked at a theater, I was very much with co-workers like all the time, all different. And again, that was when I was much younger though, and it was a different sort of workplace. So I've had lots of different workplaces with lots of different types of people. And I think regarding if women who want to be more feminine in the workplace, I think it's a matter of realizing that, as we both said, femininity is a way of being. And it's something that you shouldn't put pressure on yourself to be, because you are naturally. If you just listen to your instincts in how to manage situations, I guarantee you the feminine instinct will be the one that's at the front, but you've been trained to push it back and think, no, I have to do this. And it's like, well, actually, no, you don't. And remember, it's not just a way of presenting. It's not just a way of dressing. It's not just a way of doing your hair. It's a manner. It's a way of managing people. It's how you make people feel. It's much, much more than just putting on, a top like this and a bit of, dark pink lipstick. There's a whole plethora of stuff you can do, and it does come naturally to you. So just have confidence that is the case, and don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciate you, and you're such a great feminine influence. I've been watching you for a while now, and you can look down below and we'll find where you can find Daisy. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we get to do it again. Thanks, Daisy.
Thank you so much, Dixie. This was absolutely lovely and so much fun, and I'd love to come back on. But whenever you might need me, please let me know.
Okay. See ya.